Hello and welcome to the Property Roundup on iPropertyRadio with myself, Carol Tallon, the show where we chat to industry experts to get a view on activity on the ground and to learn about new trends emerging. This show is sponsored by daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by John O'Sullivan, Managing Director of John O'Sullivan Property Consultants. John, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. You're very good.
John, you will be very well known to our audience, but your company name might not be.
Oh, very lovely.
John O'Sullivan Property Consultants, one of the newest brand of boards going up around Dublin. Tell us a little bit about the changes you've made over the past year.
Absolutely, Carol. Well, I spent 29 years in Lisney. I joined Lisney in 1995, so had a long career in the one place. And whereas I've had many colleagues over the years who've come and gone, I stayed put. And I suppose what's interesting, when I started my career, I remember I had just got a job in Lisney. And I had met somebody. I was actually originally supposed to meet them for an interview, but I had already accepted a job in Disney. And I met them anyway, and they gave me some great career advice. And part of their career advice was they said to me to spend a certain amount of time in the big firm and then spend a little bit of time in the medium-sized firm and then go out on your own. And I suppose I spent a long time in the one place and then went out on my own. So it's a big change. It's
I,
an interesting change.
I would imagine, as somebody who's been self-employed for the best part of 2 decades, it's tough when you don't have the support that you might have been used to. 29 years is a long time.
Oh
Was
yeah.
Lisney back then, or was it Lisney Butcher?
Well, it was very different. I mean, at the time I joined, there was a company called Lisney Henry Butcher, which did plant and machinery. There was Lisney Calder Ashby that did building surveying, and then there was Lisney, which did commercial and residential sales. So it was yeah. I mean, it's been around a long time as a firm, and I suppose plenty of people have come through the door one way or the other. And in fact, if you looked at a lot of the firms around town, or certainly traditionally a lot of the firms around town, there was people working in them who had come through Lisney. So it was almost seen almost like a training house in the
Yeah.
businesses. So yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It's funny, and I don't say this as criticism. I really do. I really do mean this in a questioning way. But there is this old adage that if you stay in a job for a long time, you don't actually have 29 years experience. You might have, if it takes 3 years to learn the job, then essentially
That's
you've
it.
3 years over and over and over again.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how over those 29 years, you've been in residential all that time. How has the growth or your career evolved over that time?
Well, I suppose it's kind of like the whole industry has changed considerably. I mean, when I started, and I'm going to sound like a little bit of a dinosaur here, and I've often told these stories to graduates coming into Lisney and said, when I started, I used to have to stick the photographs on the brochures. Agents don't have brochures these days because it's surplus paper, and we're all very into sustainable ways of being. But we used to stick the photographs on the brochures. We didn't have the internet. I remember the
Yeah.
internet coming. I remember My Home and Daft, starting
Starting.
as they were. And, for instance, Hamilton Osborne and King, which is now Savills, was the first estate agent in Ireland to have a website. Lisney was the second. And, so I've seen it change considerably. Well, from the days as well of people walking into your office and saying, do you have your latest property listing? Which was the list of what they had
Yeah.
on. It was all very more personal. To be fair, it was more personal because there was more telephone work, there was more meeting people at walking into your office, or meeting people, from day to day. Whereas I suppose it's evolved to almost like the fully digital world where, the first time you meet the person who's been engaging with you is in the property, having emailed you inquiring and emailed you about this and that, or having looked at the video online, to then you meeting them in person. So it's a kind of a strange evolution of time. We obviously over that had, a boom and a bust and a boom again. So it's been a lot's been learned in that time.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And all of this we would think serves to make the transaction faster, smoother, more frictionless. That's all good. But there's been a lot of changing buyer and seller expectations during that time as well. So actually, in terms of the supports you would have had coming from almost 3 decades in the corporate world to going out on your own, how will you be able to deliver the same kind of frictionless service, knowing that again, buyer and seller expectations have really moved on?
Yeah, well, it's like, sorry, it's funny. Like now I'm all hands on, more involved in everything. Like I'm even in my head thinking I've got to get my VAT return ready now for the 19th of the month. Things you know all about. But it's funny that those things that during my time in the corporate world that I didn't have any involvement in, someone else did it for me. And now I know and realize that actually even the small minute things you're doing, you're more involved in it. Like, transactions, typing my own brochure, or like there's everything about it is, so I have full control over everything. You were talking earlier about social media. I mean, full control over my social media, full control over my branding, full control over, I can do what I want and what my clients want, so I've full control. There's no editorial, decisions to be made here that no, we can't say that in the brochure because that the house rules are that we have to say this or we have to say that, or the formatting of it. That's it. So it's very exciting, I think.
Um, do you think that that will result in maybe a different type of client for you? So the sellers that you might have had, not necessarily over the last 29 years, but even over recent years, or particularly since the recovery, going back kind of 2013, 14, 15 and onwards. Obviously we've seen such growth across the Dublin market, a boom and a critical shortage as well of quality secondhand homes coming to the market, just really slow and low turnover. Now you're moving from a corporate brand as an individual, and knowing that you are very much positioning yourself for the private client, you will be very much a boutique offering that you'll be able to provide that professional or that personal service. Do you expect that that will bring a different type of buyer or
Well,
seller? Sorry.
Keller, do you know, Carol, it's very funny. Like when I started in the business, I used to look at older colleagues, people who are my age now. And I used to kind of wonder, the phone rang and someone was specifically looking for them, or it was someone they knew from a club they're involved in, or, there was always something. And they got that business because it was the personal contact. Whereas the business I picked up in the early part of my career was the brand business. So, you got the call out because of the brand. Whereas the last few years, any of the business I did when I was in the corporate was business that came directly to me.
Okay.
It was people I knew through my network. I mean, and I like, I'm dealing with the sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters of people I might have dealt with 30 years ago or nearly 30 years ago. So it's scary like that. But it's a kind of it's a reoccurring business, but it's coming directly to me. And when I went out on my own, the biggest fear I had is, where am I going to get instructions from, or
Yeah.
who's going to be? And the big thing about estate agents is it's trust. Someone's entrusting their biggest asset with you. And what I found very interesting was the phone would ring and someone would say, and I'd say, and I would at the beginning say, oh well, I've left Lisney and I'm now doing my own thing, expecting them to say, oh well, well, okay, thank you very much, and but then they turn around and say, but we want to deal with you. And someone met me recently. I'll be selling their house in a couple of months' time, and we're just getting it all ready now. And so we had a meeting, and I genuinely thought, and maybe it was my insecurity of going out on my own and coming from the large brand to myself, I genuinely thought they were just going to butter me up to tell me, look, I can't deal with you, but you're a great lad all the same, but I can't deal with you. And
Yeah.
I'm listening, you're listening to the whole conversation, waiting for the punchline. When are they going to say, I'm sorry, I can't deal with you? And they didn't. And it was very evident to me. And the conversation evolved to what the next steps are going to be and when we're going to go to the market and what we're going to do. And 100%, it was all about me. They wanted to deal with me.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought about a little bit more about it. And yes, for the last few years, when I look at the business I took on when I was in the corporate, it was personal business, came
Yeah.
directly.
That's a lovely reminder that actually, while I'm focused on the tools and technologies, it really is about trust and it is a personal service. So even when you're dealing with a brand, you're still dealing with a human within that brand. And by the way, just on the idea of tools, just because you talked about staying up and typing up your brochures, just to let you know there are AI tools available
Oh, I
now.
know. Yeah, I know. I've
Just
been learning all of this. Yeah,
well, if I don't tell you, I just get emails afterwards saying,
I
"Why didn't you
know.
tell him to look at some
Absolutely.
AI
Yeah.
tools that would do
Yeah,
that
I
for
was
him?"
actually,
So they exist.
I'm learning that, but I'm kind of a little bit, it's like that when, and I was quite always the same. Like when
Yeah.
something was typed for me, I always used to like to edit it myself
Ah,
because,
yeah, yeah.
it's a kind of, it's a funny one. But yeah, I mean, there's all these different things I'm learning.
Well, it's more, John. If I don't say it to you, I genuinely will get emails afterwards.
I know people say,
Or worse, you'll get them.
why
You'll
didn't you
get them.
tell him?
So, but just there is a bit of a halfway measure between kind of leaving the relative security of kind of 30 years in corporate to going out on your own under your own brand. Did you at any stage consider a franchise or one of the national brands
I
that are more
actually,
partnership
funny
based?
enough, I did, and I even looked at an international, kind of it was a sort of a kind of an independent international branding, and I just kind of thought, like, what I'm selling is me, and you know, it's my name, but it's my people would have come across me over the years, people would know me over the years, people have met me. It's me.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to sell me, there's only one way of doing it, and that's just my name. And the other thing as well is I was going to fall into branding guidelines. I was going to fall into the house rules on this or that, and that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
So, so I'd certainly considered, I'd certainly looked at it. I'd been in conversation with one particular, but I didn't do it.
Yeah. No, look, genuinely, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I was just curious as to whether you'd even considered it. And don't get me wrong, we've great franchises and brands across property in Ireland, but I am really excited about the rise in independent
Oh
estate
yeah.
agencies.
It's
And
actually noticeable.
it is so noticeable, and it's a trend we've seen for the last number of years. I mean, this trend started before COVID, but I think it's really accelerated post COVID. And I was looking, and I thought this was just happening, actually in across the regional cities and across rural Ireland, but actually in the last 3 years, it's really accelerated in the Dublin market as well. So did that influence your decision at all?
Well, it sort of shows me that it can be done. And when you look at it, like a state agency has, so it was at one time it was about bricks and mortar. It was about your window. It was about your multiple windows, about the location of your windows, all of that. How many times have people, they just don't walk into estate agents' offices anymore. It's all changed. It's gone online, but it's how you take it on online. It's how you develop it online. It's gone to social media or new media, as I probably prefer to call
Yeah.
it. It's evolved to a very different place to what it was. And you can either go traditional or you can just take it on and do it your way. And a lot of the independents are taking it on and doing it their way. And everyone's doing it a little bit differently, which is nice.
Yeah.
So it's again, it's not, there's no textbook to say this is how you have to run an estate agency business, and it's the flexibility as well. And it's like, as I said, sitting up late doing typing evaluation report or something else. Yeah, but I had plenty of flexibility in the hours before it, and I went for a
Yeah.
run, I was out and about, and it was a lovely day and all of that. So
Yeah.
every day is very different. Every week is very different, and but the thing about it is, I'm doing it for me and I'm doing it for my clients. So, I'm not sitting in an office and waiting for the phone to ring, and I'm not, and a friend of mine was explaining it to me, kind of said, think about all the time you spent at office meetings. Think about all the time, sales meetings and this and that. He said, take all that time and focus it into you and your business. And it's true, and it's a
That's really good advice.
yeah.
Yeah. I like how you positioned that while we're saying the rise of independent estate agents, you're absolutely right when you say they're all a bit different. And I know that from my dealings with them. So in fact, even if I was thinking whether it was a recommendation for a buyer or a seller, I would definitely have an agency in mind that I think this agency would be a good fit for you because in my head, and I hope it's what the agents are trying to put out there, but I have a picture of who they are as a new independent brand and what I think that stands for. So actually, for people who might not have been familiar with John O'Sullivan Property Consultants, how are you different to the independents in your area?
Yeah, look, I suppose I'd probably provide, like, I'm not going to be a mass agent. I'm not going to be selling a huge amount of property, but what I'm offering is a very, like, I would probably call it like a private client type operation, or, very much it's all about the quality of service, the excellence of service, and my experience. So, like, it's just the way the world has gone as well. You look at a lot of the larger firms and a lot of the younger people working in them. And it's unfortunate because it's the way the property market has gone that a lot of those younger people, they've never bought or sold a property themselves in a personal capacity. They've never been the
Yeah.
client, they've never been the vendor of a property, they've never been the purchaser of a property. And whereas they have the skill set to sell a property, or buy a property for a client or do whatever, they've never been that other side of the fence. And, look, I know all about it. I've been there, I've been the
Yeah.
seller and the buyer, and, and you have your horror stories and, and going out and look, you keep seeing it. So, like, I suppose I'm bringing that experience to the table as well. Um, and I would see, yeah, a lot of again, it's an age thing. I'm not a young buck. But I've kind of the wise old owl bringing all the years of experience with me, and that's what I'm offering.
Yeah, I will. But then actually, one of the things we're always curious about when we speak to whether it's a startup across the property or construction side or indeed across the technology, I'm always interested in year one. Really, I'm interested in day one and week one and month one. But you touched on it there. You were nervous about where your listings were going to come from. So tell me a little about the first few listings that you got.
Yeah, well, I suppose the first house I listed was a house in Sandymount, and again, a very good client and someone I've dealt with in the past. And again, I mean, literally, it was listed just at the time, like my license was granted, and just everything fell right at the right time for me as well. From that perspective, my license was just granted, and I secured an instruction, which was coming for a couple of months anyway,
Hmm.
and it went very well. It was a real good feeling to see your own sign on a property. To see, and even okay, in the background, when I was in the corporate world, you put in your stuff onto the CRM system, actually having to manually upload it online
Yeah.
as well, and learning how to do it, because it's been a while since I manually uploaded the property online. Um, but it went well. Like the sale went well, and I followed up with another one I have in Leopardstown, which again is sale. The both those properties are now sale agreed. The house coming on in Ballsbridge in the next couple of weeks. The house coming on in Rathfarnham. There's a couple of other sort of things in the pipeline which are potentially coming. Been out doing valuation work. I'm a registered valuer. So there's a kind of keeping myself very busy. It's funny, you start a week, and other people who are self-employed have said this to me. You start the week with a blank diary, and then you end the week looking back and going, God, I was busy. Or,
Oh,
yeah,
John, only the very efficient start the week with a blank journey or a
yeah,
blank diary.
yeah,
Unfortunately, too many of my Mondays start with last Thursday's work, so
yeah.
that's
Yeah.
an
Well,
efficient.
I hope I can get to that point in my in my new business, because
Well,
yeah,
John, that would be peak efficiency.
yeah,
I'm conscious that I want to, before we wrap up, I do want to talk about what you're experiencing in the local market, and just because I know the extreme competition for properties at the moment. You touched on there, and if you can share with us that you've a couple of properties coming on stream. You particularly mentioned there at Farnham and Bridge. Can you give listeners any information so that actually, just in terms of are they
Price
both
point. Okay.
houses,
Yeah, well,
sizes,
sorry,
price
the house in
points?
Farnham is a three-bedroom. It's a semi-detached house. I'll be quoting 495,000.
Okay.
It's a
And
wonderful
what's the
location.
condition like?
Pretty good, pretty good. Very well presented, very well cared for, and in a good location. And as I say to everyone, my videos I do, DM me,
Yeah.
email me at john@josp.ie or phone me 239 0684. Getting that plug in now.
Yeah, no, please do. And
Okay.
are you taking? I presume at this stage you're already taking potential buyers
Oh,
and
absolutely.
interested
Oh,
parties.
100%. Absolutely. I'm talking to a lot of people if if you want, get in touch, talk to me. And also I mean, if I see something that's coming on, I'll say it to you, absolutely. It's
Brilliant. And the Bridge property?
Bridge one, again, it's a sort of a period property. It's 3 story. It's got a good garden, very good location. Dublin 4, be quoting around 1.3 million.
And the condition?
Pretty good, pretty good. Well cared for, well looked after. So there's a few things coming, and then the pipeline beyond that, I'd be very hopeful for what's there too. So that I'm talking to a lot of people at the moment.
Just in terms of the pipeline, I'm always so curious. This is the thing I actually drive estate agents around the country crazy about this. I know that I've been told anecdotally over the last maybe 3 months, particularly, there's been an increase. Right across the country, agents I've spoken to are reporting an increase in being called in by
Yeah,
potential vendors who don't know when they're thinking of selling, and they're not necessarily looking at um even 2024, but maybe the early part of 2025. But most of the hesitation is around, depending on the area, of course, not having the availability of property that
well,
they wish
that's
to move to.
just like I mean, I spent the last few years, as I mentioned, last few years of my career, it's been more personal contact. And I've been meeting people who I would know through different connections, and they sit down and you just have a chat. And it's not even they're asking you in for advice. That's how it starts. And you're sitting there. And the biggest frustrating thing, the questions they ask is, firstly, if I offer my house for sale, will I be able to buy? It's
Mm,
not what can I
yeah,
buy, will I be able to buy? Because supply is so tight.
yeah,
And the other side, then they're kind of going, well, look, it's not even about the price because they're fairly confident in the price of their own
yeah,
home. But they're kind of saying, well, what happens if I sell and they don't buy something? Where do I
mm,
go? Because the rental market is so starved of supply. In the past, you could sell your house, go into rental accommodation,
yeah,
take a
yeah,
year's lease, and by the time the lease came to an end, bought a house and the sale had completed and all of that. And it's a scary time for people. And there's people like the population, we've the demographics, we've a young population coming into the market buying, but you've got an older age profile who'd like to right size. I don't like saying downsize, right size.
yeah,
And, and they're sitting there so we're only building 30,000 odd housing units a year. In 2005 or 6, we built 90,000 housing units a year. And at that point, the population has grown since then. But the interesting thing is, of those 30,000 housing units we're building, and I think the figure is about 175 apartments a week are being delivered to the market. But they're being delivered to the rental market. So
yeah,
they're the funds building, buy to rent. That's not part of the roadmap for somebody who's maybe right sizing. And that's the biggest issue. So, we're meeting people, or I'm meeting people, or other agents are meeting people, but they just don't have the roadmap laid out in front of them. And they don't have the confidence to go to the market until they see. And very often, when the property comes on the market that they'd love to buy, they're not in a position to buy it because they've no bridging
they haven't,
finance. Or,
yeah.
yeah.
You've touched on something really important there, and like first things first, I wouldn't like to go back to the quality of properties we were delivering when we were delivering
No,
90 a
not at
year.
all.
That's for sure.
Not at
But I think only in the last week the ESRI came out with fresh data, and I think it really surprised the industry how low they had forecast our real needs. I think we expected that it would be forecast higher than it is, and it's still not looking above 46 to 55,000 per year, whereas I think the reality is it probably is, listening to Ronan Lyons and others, it probably is much closer to 65 to 75,000 a year that are needed. So it feels like we're still underestimating in terms of our policy. And if our policy is underestimating, it's surely not going to over deliver.
But even Carol, it's the type of properties that come to
Mm,
the market. Now, like I get it. Let's be frank about it. The cost of building an apartment is more than very often what the apartment is worth on the sales market.
yeah.
So there's no, so it only makes sense for a fund to build it for the rental market. And that, to be fair, is solving another problem. But when you're someone sitting in a house and you're thinking, God, I'd love to buy a new apartment, A-rated,
Yeah.
you know, in a nice development close by. And guess what? I can reserve number 10, which won't be built for 6 months, and I can sell my house and ease into, can do it all together. When that solution isn't there, you just get this logjam that we have with the lack of supply.
So what are you telling sellers? And sorry, I'm conscious. I know we have to wrap up now shortly, but like when you're in and you're valuing a home for sellers and you're talking them through the dynamics of the local marketplace, is there any comfort you can offer them? Like what are you telling them?
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, I carry with the blunt honesty. It's it's in my toolbox, and unfortunately, I can't but be bluntly honest to people. So, I mean, it's interesting. I met somebody earlier today who I sold their home a few months ago, and they thankfully they had somewhere to go in the interim, but they haven't bought yet. And I was met them for coffee, and we're having a chat. And the way I described it, I said, part of the explaining the problem with the market. I said, but I said, you're one of the brave. That's the way I described them. They were brave. They went to the market without the outcome at the other side.
Mm.
So, what would I do if I was retired, hoping to trade down or right size myself into a different property? I'd probably rent a long term somewhere in Portugal or Spain in a better climate and fly back at the weekend to look at properties to secure the
Yeah,
purchase. That's what I'd say. But
that's
look,
very sensible.
same for everyone. That's a solution that has two things: a long term holiday, sunshine, and then you fly back to buy. But it's not a solution for everyone either.
No.
So it's a very tricky one. But
It,
that
it
is
would it would be a tax complicated solution as well if the house
probably
hunt went
probably
on for too long.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, probably as well. Yeah.
So that's the sellers. Anything for the buyers. So I know we've touched on some properties you have coming on stream in Ballsbridge and Rathfarnham. In terms of buyers, is there any reason for people to feel more hopeful about buying in the second half of 24?
Yeah, I actually don't see the supply drastically improving, unfortunately. And that's a big problem. Um, my own view, but one bit of advice I always give buyers, and I was actually thinking this, you were talking earlier about
Yeah.
media, is that, different ideas I have. But it's the tips for buyers, and the tips for buyers are very definitely along the lines of be prepared. So have everything prepared in advance to smoothen, because everyone is giving out about the time it takes to transact a property. Now, I refer to when I started nearly 30 years ago, that was a far more functioning market.
Yeah.
More supply, but properties sold much more easily. They transacted much more easily. Now, you can argue at the time, now in hindsight, maybe the problems we have today are hindsight, the title issues that were overlooked back then. But I find it incredible it takes so long these days
Mm.
to secure a property and actually transact a property. It takes just so long. So what I always say to buyers is prepare. So have your solicitor lined up, have all your finance and everything lined up. Of course, you can't get your life assurance in place, but have the roadmap together of, so when you're getting going, what you have to get. It also shocks me as well that when people are buying, the lack of information they get from the professionals around them. The last minute saying, "Oh, have you got your house insurance set up?" And they're going, "Oh, do I have to get that set up when I haven't moved in?" Or have you got your life assurance? Oh, do I need life assurance? There's all these different things that people aren't told. And I just, it kind of frustrates me from that perspective as well.
Are you going to be taking this on? You mentioned earlier that you have started doing videos. I am already a fan of your social media, and to be honest, I'm really delighted. Genuinely through iProperty Radio, we do try to support
Oh, and
every estate
you're very good.
agent.
You're very
Well,
good. You're
no,
very good to share them as well, which is
but
that's
actually,
correctly as they are.
no, we do that. We genuinely try to encourage every estate agent, independents, franchises, within the property groups. We are so delighted when estate agents share local knowledge because we are always looking at marketplaces and we'll break them down into regions, but we would never have the kind of knowledge that you have about the potential sellers who are coming up, on what road, the potential buyers that are in that area, at what price point. So actually, we think all estate agents should be sharing more and doing more. So actually, just let people know where they can follow along with your social media and
Yeah,
stay
well,
informed.
absolutely. Well, a lot of what I have is on LinkedIn, which is my own John O'Sullivan LinkedIn page. There's also John O'Sullivan Property Consultants has a LinkedIn page, so I share on that. I'm on Instagram as well, John O'Sullivan Property, of course, and there's a Facebook page as well, John O'Sullivan Property. So
So you haven't embraced TikTok yet?
not yet, but it's
John,
growing.
you're
You never
almost
know.
there.
You never know. I'm
You're
nearly
doing
there.
videos, you're doing videos in portrait style that are suitable for YouTube Shorts and TikTok. You're
Yeah.
almost there.
I'm almost there. It's you never know. It's sort of like it could be next week. Who knows? Like it's funny. Like I started this as look, socials and and new media. I started it and I could have gone in any direction, and I'm just going with the flow.
Well, look, the idea is you have to be brave enough to be vulnerable. You have to take a chance. You're sharing information. I think your ethos is right. You want to educate the buyers and the sellers on the local marketplace around you and what you're experiencing. And the thing is, you have to then learn from your audience. So they
Absolutely.
learn from you, but you have to learn from them. And quite frankly, the joy of digital as opposed to a print ad in the newspaper that may or may not result in a phone call to the office. The joy of digital is that you can tell the impressions, the engagement, the clicks, so
Well,
you'll know when
well, the,
when
the
it's working.
funniest thing is that it's really interesting. The phone call I get a couple of hours after I've posted something from somebody. Now they have my number, they know me, but it's a kind of like if you're out of sight, you're out of mind.
Yeah, yeah,
So they see you and they go, "Oh yeah, I was meaning to ring John, or I was meaning to ring an estate agent," and
yeah.
and you get a phone call and it could lead to something.
Top of mind, John. Top of mind. Listen, congratulations on the launch of the business. And just to let people know again, that's John O'Sullivan Property Consultants. John,
That's
genuinely, very best of luck. And we look forward to seeing more of your videos, hopefully on TikTok as well. You're almost there.
I'll
You're
get
so
there.
close.
I'll get there.
So close, John. So that's
Thanks.
all we have time for today. My thanks to producer Katie Tallon and to the production team at Hear Me Roar Media. Also, huge thanks to our show sponsor, daft.ie, Ireland's most visited property website. And also, thank you indeed for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next episode of the Property Roundup. In the meantime, please be sure to check out all of the other Irish and international real estate and construction shows here on iPropertyRadio.com.